Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 197 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. Well, here we are with episode 197 and a little bit of a hiatus. Okay, a lot of a hiatus in between the last podcast and this one. And that time was filled up with some amazingly great workshops in Italy with four great groups of people in four terrific locations. And we had a great time and had a tremendous output of great and creative work. And one of the things that I noticed during this time that I was working with these people was how important subject matter was, not only to the people, but also to the output that they created. And in a previous podcast, I had used a great book, a book that I really have enjoyed reading, and I've been rereading it, a book called Bird by Bird by Lamott. And this book is a book about the creative process. It's a book about writing more than it is about photography, but you can almost always interchange the word photography for the word writing, and you get some pretty insightful ideas. And here's a little tiny quote from this book. Anne Lamott wrote, "To be a good writer, you not only have to write a great deal, but you have to care. To be a good writer, you not only have to write a great deal, but you have to care. To be a good photographer, you not only have to photograph a great deal, but you have to care." So think about one of your photographs, one of your favorite photographs. If you can find it, find the image, whether it's on screen or better yet in a print, take a look at it. Take a good long look at it. What is it about that image that made you identify it as a favorite? I suppose it's possible that it's the technique or the moment of exposure or some other aspect of the photographic process that holds your attention, that caused you to identify it as a favorite image. But I'm going to be willing to bet that more likely it's the subject matter. It's the subject of the photograph. A photographer is a lot of things, and I've detailed in previous podcasts about how a photographer is more of an editor than she is a creator. Our job as a photographer is to edit down the massive volume of material in the world to the essential things that will make an effective image, an image that communicates intent and idea, an image that tells a story, an image that tells a story that we want to tell. In a sense, a photographer is a subject selector, picking out the things that are interesting or important to him or her and paying particular attention to it. The great curator, writer, and photographer John Zarkowski referred to this process as a sort of pointing. Here's a little quote from Zarkowski. "One might compare the art of photography to the act of pointing. It must be true that some of us point to more interesting facts, events, circumstances, and configurations than others. The talented practitioner of this discipline would perform with a special grace, a sense of timing, narrative sweep, and wit, thus endowing the act not merely with intelligence, but with that quality of formal rigor that identifies a work of art, so that we would be uncertain, when remembering the adventure of the tour, how much our pleasure and sense of enlargement had come from the things pointed to, and how much from a pattern created by the pointer." That's Zarkowski, and he's saying that not only is it important to point at important things, the things that matter, but he's also saying that the more often the pointer points, the more likely they are to create a pattern, the pattern created by the pointer. So when the subject takes precedence, when you point your camera at, things that are the most interesting things to you, what you're doing is obviously expressing yourself. But when the subject becomes the most important thing about your photography, you're on your way to developing a personal style, the sense that these subjects are the most important things and can only be pointed out in this way by you. And yet, so many new photographers, or even those of us who've been at it for a while, look to the cacophony of images that come at us through the online resources like Instagram and Flickr and 500 Pics and Facebook and blogs and books and magazines, etc., as images that are the ones to be revered. And much of the time, with many of these photographs, the techniques that are employed, the gear that is used, the post production preset that was put into place, somehow that seems to take precedence. That seems to be the thing that people look at as being the reason that the photograph is good or meaningful or otherwise worth paying attention to. And what I've noticed with my workshop students and my classroom students, and of course even myself, is that when the photographer selects subject matter that is important to them, the photographs start to matter both to them and to others. So, be a subject selector and select subjects that are interesting to you. Point at them. Point at them with your camera so the rest of us can see them and see them through your eyes, through your sensibility. In the end, as you do this, you'll begin to build your own sense of style, that pattern of continuously pointing at things that you find interesting, and your own sense of how to use the mechanisms of photography to tell your own stories. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Camera Position, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode of the podcast about the creative side of photography.